I don't know about you, but I cannot believe that we are already looking towards the end of the year, and I have a list of 10 books that I want to get to before the end of the year, so let's jump into that. The first book is The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, and this is about Bella Green, who was a librarian for JP Morgan, and she was actually passing for white at the time, but she definitely was black, and JP Morgan had no idea that he had hired a black woman to be his librarian. I heard about this a very long time ago and I wanted to check it out, so I purchased it. I read Marie Benedict's book, The Mystery of Mrs. Christie, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, and I loved it. It was a page turner. I was really engaged. So I'm really curious about this book, and I'm looking forward to seeing if it's as great as I think it will be. Next up is Island Queen by Vanessa Riley, and this is again, another historical fiction book that is set in the country of Montserrat, and it's about Dorothy Thomas, who was the wealthiest, I believe, woman that lived on this island at the time. She was a free black woman, I should say, who rose from slavery to become one of the wealthiest and most powerful landowners in the colonial West Indies. As you know, I've read Vanessa Riley in the past, so I've read Sister Mother Warrior and Queen of Exiles, and I enjoyed both of these immensely, so I decided to pick this one up because when I talked about the other books, everyone's like, oh, please, read Island Queen. You need to read Island Queen. So I got this, and it was kind of like on the shelf. I wasn't really aching to read it for the end of the year until one of my mutuals, Baha Reads on Instagram, mentioned that she had read this book and she didn't really care for it, and she actually had a lot of thoughts about it, and so I didn't want to get spoiled, so I didn't read any blog that she put up or any posts, but I do want to engage with the content, you know what I mean? So I want to see what she's talking about. I personally don't mind when people critique books or authors that I've enjoyed in the past, particularly when someone is as well versed in Caribbean history as Sasha is. So I'm curious, because she is literally getting her PhD in Caribbean history, what items or what things she didn't really care for when she read this book. And so I'm curious to see what she was getting at, what she was thinking about it, and then I want to just join that discourse around this book. Next, I have The House of Plain Truth by Donna Hemmons, and this is a new release that came out earlier this year, and it is written by a Jamaican author. I think this is historical fiction. It is set, yes, it says moving through time and place from modern day Brooklyn and Montego Bay to 1930s Havana and back again. The House of Plain Truth is a journey through generational secrets and a family coming to terms with its past. So historical fiction, and there's intense, interesting family dynamics, and it seems like it's multi-generational in some type of way. So all the things that I personally love. So I'm looking forward to reading this. It's also blurbed by Sadiqa Johnson, who is a famed historical fiction writer. So I'm looking forward to reading this, and I hope to get to it before the end of the year, because I did get it this year, so I want to read it this year to see what my thoughts are about it. The next book is a TBR veteran, and that is Peach Blossom Spring by Melissa Fu. I literally have had this book, what does it say? Yes, February of 2022. So it's about to be 3 years next year. Next February is going to be 3 years since I've had this book. This book was on my priority TBR in both 2023 and 2024, and 2024 is about to end and I still have not read this book. So I put it on my TBR and I'm going to read it before the end of the year. I have to. This is a type of book which is interesting because I started reading it. I tried reading it on audio, but because of the amount of different characters that were introduced in the first, I would say, 30 pages of the book, I was kind of getting a little bit overwhelmed and I was confused about who was who, and so I knew off the bat that this is a book that I would have to read physically, which is fine, but it is a multi-generational family saga, and so it's going to take a lot of time and effort for me to focus in on all these characters and different dynamics of what's happening in the book. So I knew that I would need to buckle down and really focus. One reason why I pushed this and kind of piqued my interest a little bit more in the last few weeks was because another mutual of mine's, Kenzie Noel on Instagram, she had read this book recently and gave it 4 stars. So it made me even more excited to kind of prioritize it and pick it up. Kenzie loves historical fiction just as much as I do, so it made me really trust that this is going to be a good book that I enjoy. She also disliked a very popular historical fiction book that I also disliked, And so I felt like our tastes are pretty similar in that regard. So I'm hoping that I read it and fall in love with it. And this is a book that I will recommend to other people in the future. Next, I have The Great Divide by Cristina Enriquez. And this is a book that is documenting and discussing the construction of the Panama Canal as historical fiction yet again. I saw this pop up, I think, on Goodreads as like an anticipated release or an upcoming historical fiction release for 2024. And when I saw it was a book of the month pick, I went ahead and just scooped it up. I am curious about the Panama Canal's construction because I remember watching, I think it was back in when I was like in middle school or high school. I want to say middle school. My dad played a documentary for my brother and I to watch, and it was all about the construction of the Panama Canal and how a lot of different people came from all over the Caribbean, all over the US, different places around the world to help in aiding in constructing the Panama Canal, and they ended up going to Panama and staying and living there, creating communities there. That was interesting to me. I know that there is a character in here that is from Barbados that ended up going to Panama to help in the construction of the canal. So I'm really curious about the history. Thinking that I'm gonna really enjoy this book. Is fairly short. I want to say it is, yeah, it's just hitting 300 pages. I'm hoping that I like this. I think this was just nominated for, it's been longlisted, I guess you would say, on the Goodreads Choice Awards that's going on right now. So yeah, I hope to read it and then hopefully be able to vote for it. And because I just said that, you probably are having an idea of when this is being filmed, so there we go. Next is yet another book of the month pick, and that is The Mayor of Maxwell Street by Avery Cunningham. This is set in 1920s, specifically 1921 in Chicago, and this is a debut novel for Avery, and that's pretty much all I know about this. I saw the cover. I thought the cover was bomb, and also I am curious and interested in that time period in the 1920s. One of my all-time favorite books is Passing by Nella Larsen, and so that was written in the 1920s. So I'm curious on Avery's take, or I should say Miss Cunningham's take on this book. And yeah, that's all I really know about this book. It was kind of on my radar for like must-reads for 2024 as far as anticipated releases. I really wanted to make it more of a priority to purchase the historical fiction releases that were coming out, and so I did that. Now I just got to read the books. Next up, the last book of the month, I think, yeah, the last book of the month pick that I have on this TBR, and that is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I know that Long Bright River by Liz Moore was, you know, a fan favorite for a lot of people, and I'm not a thriller mystery kind of girl, but I do like reading mystery thrillers every now and then, especially to break up when I'm reading very intense, emotional historical fiction, which is the range, I guess, of historical fiction that I tend to pick up and enjoy. Anywho, so this is set at a summer camp in, I believe it's set near the woods in some way, and unfortunately a young girl goes missing, and so it's essentially a mystery figuring out what happened to the young girl, if she's still alive, and all those things. And that's all I know. I know this came out in July 2024, and so this is more of like a summer read. I know in the fall people tend to like reading like mysteries and whatnot. And also, fun fact, I live in Florida, so it's summer pretty much all year round. So I can read this essentially anytime I want, including in the fall or winter. So hoping that this is a good read for me, that I enjoy it. I know a couple people have read it and thought really highly of it. When I said that, I sound like Eleanor from Sense and Sensibility. I greatly esteem him. I think very highly of him. I like him. Anyways, but yes, so this book has gotten rave reviews. Also, what I've heard is that even though it's a very thick book, I want to say it's like over 400, yes, it's well over 450 pages. It is a page turner that people didn't really even feel that it was that long of a book. It's unputdownable is how it was described to me. You know, in the midst of my, you know, emotional books that I tend to pick up, I can pick this one up and see if I like it. All right, we are officially out of the historical fiction zone slash you want to add like one thriller. We're in historical fiction. Let's jump into fantasy. And this is kind of like a bridge between fantasy and historical fiction, but this is The Forgotten Kingdom by Signe Pike. And this is book 2 in The Lost Queen. It used to be a trilogy, now it's going to be a quartet. I recently read, I literally just finished like a day or so ago, The Lost Queen, and loved it. Loved it. It was so good. So in this story, we are following Langoreth, and she is a prominent, powerful queen in 6th century Scotland, and she's also the twin sister of the man who inspired the legend of Merlin. And so I saw that. I saw Scotland. I saw that it was following a lost queen or a queen of some kind, and I saw that it had something to do with Arthurian legend, and I was sold. But I also was like hesitant that, you know, because I hadn't heard a lot of people talk about the book, I was nervous. I'm like, oh, am I gonna like it? But the first book is phenomenal, so well written. It's definitely, it's considered historical fantasy, but I think it's more so historical fiction with like a dash of fantasy. There really isn't that many, or I should say there aren't that many fantastical, you know, aspects of it, but it was just so well written. I love how political it was. It was very much like a political, I'm kind of going into like a full review of The Lost Queen right now, but anyways, it's very much so like a political fantasy or political fiction book, in the sense of there's a lot of different dynamics. There's different families, and then there's constantly people playing chess, not checkers. Like there's people making one move, but it affects like 5 moves down. So needless to say, I read that one and I was like, okay, I want to read the next book in the series. So I hope to read this before the end of the year. I know the next book in the quartet, The Shadowland, is coming out December 3rd. So I want to read this a little bit closer to that release date so I can, you know, finish it, kind of be immersed in the world that's set up here, and then go to the bookstore and pick it up same day. I am no longer doing pre-orders with Barnes & Nobles, okay? No more pre-orders with Barnes & Noble, because man, it's a whole other story. Anyways, and in the same vein of anticipated sequels and books, I have What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez, and this is a historical fantasy that is following an Egyptologist, and it's also a mystery of some kind. That's all I know. It has an Egyptologist, and it's a mystery of some kind, and it's a little bit of, you know, fantastical thing. I picked this up like last November. I actually picked this up back in my hometown because the Barnes & Noble around my house, or near my house I should say, did not have this edition, but I wanted this one because, if you can't tell, your girl loves purple, and I wanted the purple cover. Okay, it's been almost a year. It's been almost a year and I still have not read this book, and now the sequel is coming literally in a few, I think it already came out. By the time you've seen this video, the sequel has already come out, where the library hides. So I want to read this, and then just to figure out, okay, am I gonna go and buy the sequel? I don't really like buying sequels for books if I haven't read book 1. The only reason why I did that with The Lost Queen of Forgotten Kingdom was because I bought the second book because it was $5 when originally it was $28, so that was a steal. And then I was able to find the first book for like, I don't know, $6 something like that on Pango. So that's the only reason why I did that. Typically, if I haven't read the first book, I don't go and like buy the whole series, because what if I don't like it? So I'm doing the same thing here. I didn't want to pre-order the second book until I read this one. So now I got to read it to see how I'm feeling about it, and then if I do like it, then I'll move on. Okay, now let's move into, let's do nonfiction, which is my only nonfiction, which is Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. So this, I feel like there's no need of an introduction for Isabel Wilkerson. I love her work. Literally the book, The Warmth of Other Suns, is one of my favorite books of all time. I have 2 copies. I don't like buying multiple copies of books, but I have 2 copies because I had the one hardcover copy that I read. And it's funny because for Christmas last year, I said, hey, I would like books for Christmas if possible. And, you know, go ahead and pick books that you think I would like. And one of my aunts, I guess knowing me very well, but not knowing me well enough to know that I read the book, actually bought the paperback edition for The Warmth of Their Suns for me. So I have 2 copies of that. I'm not getting rid of either of them. But this one, I don't know much about this other than I know in The Warmth of Their Suns, she discusses caste systems, and she hints at them throughout the book. It's definitely, I would say The Warmth of Other Suns is a narrative nonfiction because we follow the lives of 3 individuals while also learning about what was going on in the midst of the Great Migration, and, you know, finding stuff from newspaper reels and articles and things like that. This one I think is a purely nonfiction book, And let's see, the description says it's a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomenon as she explores how America throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human rankings. Immersive, deeply researched, and beautifully written, Caste inspires us to transcend artificial and destructive divisions toward hope in our common humanity. So I feel like I'm gonna love this book. It's kind of like one of those things where you anticipate a 5-star, but you're like holding back, you don't want to be disappointed. But I really don't think I'm gonna be disappointed. I actually want to read this and then watch her. There was a movie on Hulu that's about her life and pretty much the reasons of why she, wrote what she did, The Warmth of Other Suns, and also, her research into caste systems and things like that around the world. So yeah, I at least want to start this book. It took me a year to finish The Warmth of Other Suns because I was just taking my time absorbing the story and absorbing all the information. So I'm at least gonna plan on starting this before the end of the year. I don't necessarily have to finish it before the end of the year. Lastly, I have You Make It Feel Like Christmas by Toni Shiloh. And this is a Christmas romance. So I love Christmas. It's my favorite holiday actually, but I'm not a Christmas fiction, Christmas romance kind of girl. I don't even really watch Hallmark movies that often, but anyways, I don't really do it. But I read In Search of a Prince by Toni Shiloh and really loved it, really enjoyed her writing style, and so I wanted to read more of her work. And I thought, hey, if anyone's gonna get me into Christmas fiction, it might be Toni Shiloh. So I actually got this as a giveaway gift from Kayla, from Kayla's Bookish Vibes, and we're actually gonna be doing a buddy read, so I'm excited to read this with her and get her response and how she feels about this story as it unfolds. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to lift this up. I'm not even gonna try. So that's all the books that I hope to read before the end of the year. Let me know in the comments below what books you plan on reading and if any of these books are books that I should put on my radar to read first. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it and subscribe if you want to join the fam. And if you're looking for another video to watch from me, go ahead and click right here and I will see you in the next one. Take care.